you help directly reduce climate gases. And that is really huge. And that's something that everyone can do right away. And that is that we hope that we can help you with on this channel. Hey, what's up? This is Mark, and today we're reacting to the first season of The Dish. The reason we do this is because we're interviewed Dana Gunders, and Dana said a lot of really cool things, and I think a lot of that can be explained quite a bit. So with no further ado, let's just dive right into it.
Yeah, well, I think I see it a lot, right? I mean, as compared with I think the biggest challenge in our country for consumers and all of us in our own homes and our own lives is that we don't really see it, right? We've become very numb to how much food gets tossed out. You just clear your plate, you finish dinner.
Yeah, I think she makes a really good point here. So what she says is that she sees it a lot. Which basically means because she's working with food waste for such a long time, she's becoming a lot more aware of it. And that happened to me too. Since we started this podcast, I'm a lot more aware of where we're wasting food in our household. So you really get a better sense of where food waste happens if you are actively thinking about it or working with it in any kind of sense. And then the other point she makes, which is really, really important, is that also in our society, it has become very, very normalized to throw away food. It is a normal thing to do. We throw away food every day and nobody thinks about it. That is insane if you think about it from there's no other animal that throws away food in that extent as we do, perfectly fine food.
Scrape it in the garbage and put it in the dishwasher, and that's what you do. You clean your fridge out, you throw a bunch of stuff that went bad, oops, and that's that. And
yeah, what she's saying here is also very true. All the typical habits that we have, that we just throw stuff into the trash because we want to put stuff into the dishwasher, or throw leftovers into the trash because we don't want to keep them in the fridge, or we move stuff around in the fridge and forget stuff in the fridge. So that's very, very normal behavior. All of us have done this, and all of that contributes to household food waste.
It's become very normalized, and so it's hard to see for most people. One of my favorite statistics is that 75% of Americans say they waste less than the average American.
75% of Americans say they waste less than the average American, which means that a lot of people are not aware that they waste food in such a big amount. And again, this is not just on a household level. So there's also, if you go to a restaurant, or if you go to a buffet style restaurant, or if you go to a grocery store, they're all places where you as a consumer contribute to food waste in a certain way. So, and that all together amounts to a really large part. And but a big portion of that happens also on the consumer level, directly in the household, so directly where you live. So that's where you can start. You can start reducing food waste in your everyday life by just starting to reduce food waste in your kitchen. That's a good start. And that is what this channel is going to do. It's going to let you know how to do that, I hope, at least. And also how to save money and how to have a positive impact on your own life and also on the life of others by doing that.
Which is kind of emblematic of the fact that we don't see ourselves doing it. And I think, so for me, because I work in this and I'm so aware, I see it a lot, and I see it in our own home. We're not perfect by any means. And I also see it just when I'm with others, right? I go stay with friends, or I'm at somebody's house, and I see kind of how they're managing their food. And I just see the waste happening. Because the thing about food waste, nobody wants to waste food. Nobody wakes up in the morning going, hey, I'm going to waste food today. Isn't that great? But what happens is we don't manage our food well. Mm-hmm. And then waste happens, right? Or we're trying to, we're prioritizing other things. Maybe we really want our kids to like vegetables.
Yeah, so on a household level, and that's what she's talking here for the most part, is household. What can we do in the kitchen or in our house to reduce food waste? And I think this key piece is our relationship to food. So how do we manage our food has a lot to do with how we think about food, and how our relationship is to food. There's also a lot of behavior attached to this. Are you going to places to eat or going out that actually waste a lot of food? How can you find out about those? Are you buying at places that waste a lot of food? So that's all like stuff that we hope that we can talk about, and that we hope we get some information out to people on this channel. So, and Dana's going to talk about this a little bit more later in the podcast, but I don't think, if I'm going at this pace, I don't think we're going to get there today. So let's just continue and see where we get.
We are going to put them in their lunch every single day to make sure they have a chance to eat those, before, and they're going to come home. 90% of the time, they're going to come home uneaten. So we're just prioritizing that. And that's a trade-off, right? And maybe you have a plan for that. In our household, we do that. We have a plan. Oftentimes, they don't eat their carrots. Okay, we chop them up and we put them into dinner, right? We don't just throw them out. So sometimes you can plan around it. Maybe you're hosting a party.
So it's really easy things like this that that really make a difference. So instead of like throwing away stuff that you could reuse in another dish, try to reuse it in another dish. So it requires some planning, but those are really good tips. Those are very, very good tips. And they're very specific for each household, because not everyone likes carrots, not everyone eats carrots. So that's just like for somebody who likes to have carrots. But those are very good tips.
Want to be a really good host, you definitely don't want to run out of food. So you're going to make a ton of food and oops, a lot of it didn't get eaten. You can have a plan for that, right? You can have leftover containers available so that you can send your guests home with some food.
Yeah, so that actually, we did this a couple of weeks ago when my mom was visiting. And we had a party, we invited a lot of friends, and we had a lot of food. It was a potluck, but we also prepared a lot of food, and we had tons of food left over. And we had containers ready, and we had stuff ready, and we really, told people, take it with you. And it happened. Everything was gone, and nothing was wasted. So that's a very, very good advice here as well.
Like that. So, but I think, how do I feel? I feel like there's a lot of opportunity, because people, once they see it, once they start paying attention, they really figure out how to reduce it. I think it's a very actually empowering issue to work on, because it's something we can do right now. It has such a huge impact in the world. I think that.
So I 100% agree with her here. It has a lot of opportunity for a lot of different things, but just on the household level, if we don't think about entrepreneurship and don't think about all the technology and everything else that we also will cover in our podcast and later in our shows, but if we just think about the household level and what kind of opportunity it brings. So first of all, number one is, I do the thumb. Number one is it brings, there it is. I was wondering where it is. So number one, it saves money. That's the first opportunity. If a lot of people are pretty low on household money, wasting food, like throwing away food that you just purchased a week ago, is costing you money. So saving that money will have an impact on your household, on your quality of life, etc. Secondly, it has a huge impact on climate change. That is something that we can do directly, that positive impacts the amount of climate gases that are produced, positive impacts the amount of environmental resources that are used to produce this food. So that is something that is also, even if you don't, need to save money, this is something you can do right away.
People don't realize, but once they realize that, it's a place that we can really take action right now. You mentioned COP28. I don't know if all your listeners would know that was the big climate conference that just happened. But there are huge climate implications of food waste. We're learning more and more about that every day. And climate change is kind of overwhelming, right? And often we feel a little bit powerless to affect it. And I think food is one of those places where you can really take action like every day, and it has a real impact.
Yeah, so I already mentioned this, but I do want to say this again. Producing food waste, or like just household food waste, if you think about how much energy and labor and land and water goes into the production of food, and then into the now we're just not talking about the production, especially if we talk about fresh fruit and fresh vegetables. They have to be not just harvested, but they also have to be stored and shipped. All that is usually a cool chain. It's what we call a cool chain. So it's that produce is going to be moved into a cooling chamber, and then from the cooling chamber on refrigerated trucks, and then from the refrigerated truck into the refrigerated grocery store until it actually on the shelf. So all that refrigeration is a huge amount of energy that also goes into food production, basically. So if you just think about that, how insane it is that you then take that food and just throw it away. So that itself is like super, super insane. And then on top of that, there's a lot of evidence for food that is being thrown into the landfill that it will produce more climate gas, especially methane, which is a very potent climate gas. So you have like basically a double effect of food waste on climate change itself, So that's a really, really big thing. So you're not just saving money by like using the food that you actually buy in your household, but also you help directly reduce climate gases. And that is really huge. And that's something that everyone can do right away. And that is that we hope that we can help you with on this channel.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, because I think people talk about this as if it's one issue, but it's actually a very different issue if you're, looking at tomatoes that never get harvested on a farm versus a science experiment in somebody's fridge, right?
Yeah. So what she's saying is that so until now we talked about household and what we can do in a household. And again, a lot of what we do in this channel is surrounding that. But the entire complexity of food waste and where food is lost across the supply chain is really depends on the crop and depends on the level of the supply chain, really. So what she's saying is that you can do a lot on your household, and that is where in America most of the food is wasted, is on the retail and the consumer level. But there are stages across the entire supply chain where food is lost.
So what's driving it varies by the sector and by the product type as well, which makes it, frankly, much more complicated than energy efficiency or something like that, right? So yeah, at the farm, what you were describing, unmarketable product, that is a huge challenge. And I think an addressable one, because the concept of something not being marketable is actually created by us, right? As long as it's edible, we should be able to find a way to use it. The fact that we have a separate distinction called marketable sort of shows that we're actually designing waste into the system at that stage by making that distinction. Other challenges on farms, labor is a big one. Sometimes there's labor shortages that can lead to food being left on the fields.
Yeah, so what she's saying here, so we're now on the farming level, so really on the production level. And what she's saying here is very true. And I really honestly never thought about this. This is the level that I work most in my researcher life, And I never thought about this. But typically on the farming level, food waste is minimal in the United States. Not always true, depending on the food category. But what she's saying here is that there are certain standards for acceptable food that big retailers have. There are USDA standards for acceptable food, especially on the fruit and vegetable side. And she's not 100% wrong about this. It's like that those grades and food standards that we have, they're already built-in mechanisms to produce waste at a certain point, because there will be always certain fruit or certain vegetables that are edible, that are not like diseased or like blemished or have anything that makes them unedible, but they're not appealing enough, or they don't have the right appearance or size or firmness or sugar levels, for example. Like apples have to be like a certain percentage red to be category 1, for example, and there are certain sugar levels that a clamshell full of strawberries has to have. And then that already produces like certain food that is technically edible, or that's edible, but it's not marketable, So she's not wrong about this at all. And then the other point she makes is that there are labor shortages. That's something we struggle with in agriculture every year. Some of those labor shortages will lead to like picked fruit or unpicked vegetables in the field, for example. And then the other thing is that sometimes the market price dictates whether or not it's actually efficient enough? Like, is it cost efficient to actually pick the food, or is it like harder? Is it like more affordable to not pick the food? So yeah, those are all like issues on the production level.
And pricing is another one. So because market pricing varies, sometimes, growers can get $30 for a case of broccoli. Sometimes it's $6.
Yeah, she's saying it here. Yeah.
Per case. And depending on the price, it may or may not be worth it for them to pay the labor to harvest it and to cool it and to transport it and to get it to market. So that's another driver at the farm level. Manufacturing and processing, I mean, it's pretty efficient, but at the same time, they're not always using everything, right? So French fries may not use the peels of potatoes. And so in peeling, thousands and thousands and thousands of potatoes, you have a lot of extra edible product that doesn't go into the human food supply chain. And so there's a lot of opportunity. We're seeing these upcycled products come out now.
We're on the production level. And again, like production and this whole post-harvest manufacturing processing level, that's pretty efficient in like, especially in the United States and other higher income country. Those processes can be very inefficient in like lower income countries where you waste a lot of food already on those stages. And that's what she's saying. She's saying it's usually pretty efficient, but there are a lot of byproducts in the processing and manufacturing part that are usually being thrown away, that there are now companies that start building like new things out of those byproducts. Not necessarily edible things, but at least they're using those. And then there's also this entire transportation and shipping and storing portion that I talked about before, where you have the cooling. Usually that's additional energy. And I don't think she's mentioned but again, that's a very efficient process. There's not a lot of food waste happening in this cooling chain because we really have figured it out, at least in the United States, how to do this pretty efficient. But it is a lot of energy that goes into there. So a lot of additional energy that just we need to cool our produce for the transportation, for the storage until it actually ends up in our households.
Are making new products out of those byproducts that previously were not used for food. In grocery stores, the average grocery store manages about 50,000 different products. And so it's very tricky for them to manage and to essentially predict how much they're going to sell of each of those products at each of those stores on any given day. And so actually something we're seeing with a lot of promise there is the use of artificial intelligence to help identify.
Yeah, so we're now at the grocery and retailer store level already. So that's years of, we went through production and then we went to the manufacturing processing level. I talked a little bit about the storage and shipping portion. And now we're at the retail and grocery store. And that is really important because that is where a lot of food waste happens now. So that's like, that's where we know the first stage where a lot of food is actually wasted. And what she says here is that is very challenging because grocery stores do manage a lot of different products, like 50,000, 60,000 products. And that now new technology like AI technology can really help manage those products better. And then there are also like food. I think we're talking about this in the podcast, but there are apps that help grocery store now manage like products that are getting off the shelf to get rid of them instead of like throwing them away, selling them for like less money, or donating them to food banks, etc., etc. So there's a lot of movement on that front actually that helps to reduce food waste on the retail level as well. And then I hope we here on the channel can help you to like find out retailers that using those apps. We can give you like an overview about those apps. There's some really cool apps out there. Yeah, so I think that's what she's talking about here.
By patterns in sales that maybe people who were in charge of purchasing that before couldn't identify as easily. So really some like big data work that's happening there that's providing some interesting solutions. We're also seeing last minute sales be a new area of opportunity. So, a lot of grocery stores will take their products off the shelves 2 or 3 days before the product actually expires. And so right as they're taking them off the shelf, is there an opportunity to do a flash sale? Currently we see like 50% off stickers sometimes put on things, but now there are apps coming out to get much more sophisticated about that 50% off approach and to broadcast that to a lot more people and actually increase sales of those products before they take them off the shelves. In restaurants, we see way too much served. Portion sizes are probably the biggest challenge. And most of the waste in restaurants is happening on people's plates. The majority not actually back in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, people there. Just take your leftovers, man. Don't throw them away or don't give them back. Just take them with you. They can make you a second meal or a third meal. Even if you're full at that time, you're going to appreciate them later. So, just take your leftovers, put them to the fridge. Don't leave them on the plate. They have to throw it away. And that's where a lot of the restaurants are usually very efficient with the food they have in the kitchen, because they don't want to throw any food away. Because, again, it's money, But take your leftovers with you. Seriously, I'm not even kidding. Just take it with you.
And then, of course, in our homes, there's a suite of issues that are leading us to throw food out as well.
Yeah. So, and we talked about household at the beginning of this video, and I think this is long enough. The bottom line is that, if you have a more intimate relationship with your food, and if you start managing your food a little bit better, and you can learn this, and we help you learning this, I'm learning it right now with you guys. You will waste less, and I think the first step is really look at your kitchen and think where you can save food. Maybe think where this food is coming from. Educate yourself a little bit about that, and then you find a lot of tips on this channel. And I'm stopping it here. More later. See you next time.